For a very long time, if you had asked me if I was stressed, I probably would have said, no, I'm functioning just fine. Actually, I'm functioning quite well. I'm working, taking care of people, running, mountain biking, skiing, depending on the season. I'm raising my son as a single mom, building a business, solving problems, getting things done. And I think that's exactly why I didn't recognize what my body was actually trying to tell me. Because somewhere along the line, I confused functioning well with being well. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Somewhere along the way, I confused functioning well with being well. And those two are not necessarily the same thing. And that's what I want to do a deep dive into and talk about today. Because survival doesn't always look like someone's falling apart. Many times, survival looks remarkably successful. Welcome. My name is Jodi Medell. I am the owner of the Healing Continuum and the Healing Continuum Method. I'm also an integrative and functional medicine practitioner with a doctorate in physical therapy, with over 30 years of clinical experience as a physical therapist. Anyway, if you've watched my conversation on survivalist personality, you know I've been really fascinated by this idea that some of the characteristics we think of as our personality have actually started as adaptations of the nervous system. What am I talking about? Being driven, being independent, being responsible, always being productive, being the strong one that everyone can depend on, never needing help. And I want to be really clear about something. I am not saying that these are bad qualities. I still highly value many of these qualities in myself. But what I'm becoming very curious about is something different. Where did they come from? And what does it cost the body to maintain them? So I'm going to give you the scenario of a woman who looks just fine. She's probably the person everyone depends on. She gets up early, and maybe she even exercises before the rest of the family is even awake. She goes to work, she takes care of the family, she remembers the appointments, she answers all the emails, she solves the problems. Something unexpected happens, she handles it. Someone needs help, she is right there. She's tired, but she keeps going. And everyone around her thinks she's simply amazing, the Energizer Bunny Rabbit. And maybe she is. But nobody looks at this woman and thinks, gee, I wonder if her nervous system is in overwhelm. Because she doesn't look overwhelmed, she looks totally capable. And that's the paradox I want to start discussing today. Sometimes our ability to keep functioning can hide how much adaptation is actually happening underneath it all. And I know this woman because I've been this woman. Movement has been part of my life for as long as I can remember. Running has become my identity. Many things that allow me to be a high achiever have become my identity. Being physically capable, helping people, being independent. And if something became difficult, my solution was really easy and quite simple. Work harder, figure it out, just keep going. And that strategy worked really well for me for a long time, until I started realizing something. My capacity to keep going had become the evidence that I used to prove that I was okay. Now think about that. As long as I could still run, still work, still take care of people, still accomplish what needed to be accomplished in a day, then obviously I was fine, except my body occasionally had a different opinion. For me, one of the ways my body has communicated has been through migraines. I've had migraines since I was young. But what has fascinated me as I've gotten older is recognizing that sometimes my physiology knows that I'm carrying too much. And it happens before my conscious mind even knows. My mind can say, I'm fine. My schedule can say, look at everything I'm doing, what I'm accomplishing. My workouts can say, see, you're still really strong. Look at what you can pull in a day. And my body can still say, we're carrying too much. That realization has changed the way I think about stress. Before, I used to think stress was just something you felt. Now I understand that stress is also something the body manages. And this is where I think the term high functioning becomes really interesting. We tend to assume that functioning is evidence of health. Sometimes it is. But functioning is also something the body is extraordinarily good at preserving because your body adapts, it compensates, it reallocates resources. It figures out how to keep you moving forward. That's one of the reasons humans are so resilient. But adaptation is not free. There's a physiological cost to repeatedly asking the body to meet demands without giving the opportunity to the body to recover. I've been using this analogy of an airplane while writing my book, and I also used it in the last video, maybe even the last 2 videos. And I'm going to use it again today because I believe it really helps me understand about how we treat our bodies. So think about that commercial airplane. We don't wait till the engine fails before deciding that the plane needs maintenance, right? Planes are intentionally taken out of service. They're inspected, parts are replaced, systems are checked, and here's the important part. The fact that an airplane successfully flew yesterday doesn't mean that it doesn't need maintenance today. Its ability to stay in the air isn't proof that it doesn't need attention. And I think sometimes we treat ourselves exactly the opposite way. We say, hey, I made it through the week. I got that workout done. I handled everything, and I'm still functioning. Therefore, I must truly be okay. But maybe that's not quite the right question to be asking. Maybe the better question isn't, can I keep doing this? Maybe the better question is, what is it costing my body to keep doing this? All right, so now I want to bring in a little bit of physiology. Our bodies are constantly adapting to demands. Your autonomic nervous system, made up of your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system, helps regulate things you don't consciously think about, have to think about at all. It regulates your heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, energy mobilization, and countless other things going on in the system. And when there's a challenge, that sympathetic nervous system kicks into activation and helps mobilize us, right? It makes us alert, on point. Energy becomes more available. We are prepared to act. And that's not bad. We need that. And I don't want to get into a judgment between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic activation, because the reality is we need both. And we need to be able to move through both. So let's not be overly simplistic here. The healthy nervous system, it needs activation. But we also need to be able to respond to all challenges. Challenges of activation, and maybe the bigger challenge of coming off that activation, of being able to step down. Can we recover? Can we sleep deeply? Can we digest? Can we repair? Can we experience stillness without immediately needing more stimulation? Can the body move flexibly between demand and recovery? To me, that's a better picture of regulation. I want to bring in a term that I think is important to understand. There's a concept in physiology called allostasis. Allostasis is essentially the body's ability to create stability through change. Life changes, your body adapts, and that is truly brilliant. But when those adaptations are repeatedly required over longer periods of time, there's a term that researchers call allostatic load, and that's what it is. You can think of it as accumulated physiological burden of continuously adapting over time. Okay, I'm spinning over my words here. Let me say this all over again. The term allostatic load. When those adaptations are repeated over long periods of time, that creates what's called an allostatic load. And you can think of it as the accumulated physiological burden of having to constantly adapt. And I think that's incredibly important for high-functioning people to understand, because you can be adapting successfully and still be accumulating that physiological load. And you don't necessarily notice it immediately. And that's what makes it so easy to miss. But eventually, the body starts to send us some signals. It gives us information. It can look like sleep changing, recovery taking longer, having that digestive system change. Maybe you start to experience more pain. Maybe you're tired but can't settle, that tired but wired feeling. Maybe the exercises that once made you feel so incredibly great now leave you feeling a little bit depleted. And maybe you notice changes in your blood sugar regulation. Maybe inflammation has become more apparent. What about headaches, migraines? Maybe they're more frequent. None of those symptoms automatically means chronic stress is the cause. And I want to be very clear about that, because some symptoms really do deserve to have medical evaluation. But what I want to plant in your head today is I want to take you or invite you to look at the total load the body is carrying, rather than looking at every single symptom in isolation, because it all exists together. I think this becomes an interesting concept or interesting idea, especially in women in midlife, because I've experienced this personally, and I've also treated a lot of women who have experienced it clinically. You can spend decades living life a certain way, and then suddenly what didn't work, or what did work, doesn't work anymore. Recovery changes, sleep changes, body composition changes, hormones change, our response to training changes. And there are often enormous life demands happening at the exact same time. Careers, children, parents, relationships, financial obligations and responsibilities. Then menopause enters a system that's already been adapting for decades. And I don't think that menopause necessarily creates everything that we experience at that time. What I really think is that sometimes it reveals just how hard the system has already been working. For the woman who has always been able to outwork everything, that can be incredibly unsettling. Because suddenly, the strategy that always worked doesn't. There's another curveball here. I want to bring in identity. So this brings me back to survival as personality. Because what happens when the things you're best at, like pushing through, doesn't work? What happens when being capable isn't something you just do? It's truly who you believe you are. What happens when your body asks for rest, but resting to you feels like weakness? And what happens when asking for help threatens an identity built around being super independent? What happens when slowing down makes you feel much less like yourself? Now, we're not simply talking about stress physiology anymore. We are talking about identity. And I think that's why this work goes so much deeper than telling someone to simply meditate, slow down, and take a few breaths. Because that might not work when the identity says, that's not who I am. So, I've been asking myself a different question these days, and maybe it will be useful for you as well. Instead of asking, can I handle this? Because honestly, I can handle a lot. And my guess is you can too. But what I am asking is, what is it costing me to handle this? Now that's a completely different question, because capability doesn't really tell us anything about the physiological cost. And that's really the distinction I want you to take away today from today's conversation. Functioning is not the same as regulating. You can be productive and exhausted, successful and hypervigilant, strong and depleted, highly capable and unable to rest. You can look completely pulled together from the outside, while your body is working incredibly hard underneath to maintain that appearance of success. And again, that isn't weakness. That is adaptation. The body is doing what it's always done. It's figuring out how to keep you moving forward. So, I'm not going to give you 5 things to do to end this video, and I don't want you to try and optimize anything today. I don't want you to turn nervous system regulation into yet another thing you need to achieve. I just want you to notice. The next time you tell yourself, I'm fine, ask yourself, how do you know? Is it because you actually feel well? Do you feel restored, recovered, rested, present? Can you stop? Can you experience quiet without immediately needing to fill it? Or is your evidence simply, I'm still getting everything done? Because I'm beginning to understand that there's a profound difference between having the capacity to keep going and having the capacity to recover. For most of my life, I've trained the first one. Now, I'm learning how to respect the second. And maybe, really maybe, that's part of what healing actually is. Not becoming less driven, not becoming less capable, not giving up the qualities that helped any of us build our lives, but developing something right alongside them. Flexibility. The ability to accelerate when life asks us to accelerate. And the ability to come back down when the demand has passed. Maybe real resilience isn't how long we can keep our foot on the accelerator. Maybe it's knowing that we can safely take it off. And I think safe is the key word, because many of us feel so much safer pressing that accelerator. But we don't necessarily feel safe when we feel nothing is going on, when we're resting and recovering. If you're recognizing yourself in these conversations around survival as personality, please subscribe and stay with me. We're going to keep exploring this together. What survival looks like when it hides inside success, and what it does to the body over time, and ultimately, how we begin teaching the nervous system that something different is possible. Not only possible, that something different is also safe. And this week, don't fix anything. Just get super curious. Ask yourself, am I actually well? Or am I simply really, really good at functioning? I'll see you next week.